First of all, I just wanted to welcome everyone really quickly to this forum on Post-Roe Pennsylvania. I think it obviously is one of the most crucial issues in the election. And so for those who don't know me, my name is Jeff Scott. I'm the chair of DCLMN. I think the issues here are just, really will help us focus on what's at stake in this election, and really hope everyone walks away from this, not only knowing what's at stake, but knowing what they could do over the next couple of weeks to kind of change the outcome of what's going to happen on November 8th. Before we get into the content, though, I wanted to, just make sure everyone was familiar with all the hard work that our subcommittee, the Issues and Policy Subcommittee, has worked on this event to put this together. Great panel. And since our time is limited, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jim Spear, who chairs our Issues and Policy Committee, to get us into the issues we're going to discuss tonight.
Thanks, Jeff, and hello to everybody. In June of this year, the U.S. Supreme Court issued the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade and a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. This decision leaves the legal status of abortion up to the states, paving the way for restrictive abortion. Here in Pennsylvania, the General Assembly has advanced an amendment to the state constitution that will open the door to bans that not only limit, but will potentially criminalize abortion. Tonight, please join us in welcoming our moderator, former U.S. Representative Marjorie Margolis, and our panel of state legislators and local physicians who will discuss the impact of the Dobbs decision and legislation that follows on the health and welfare of women in Pennsylvania and their families. Former U.S. Representative Marjorie Margolis, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and a former Emmy-winning broadcast journalist, served in Pennsylvania's 13th Congressional District. A lifelong advocate for women, she chaired the National Women's Business Council and was the director and deputy chair of the United States delegation to the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in 1995. She's the founder and chair of Women's Campaign International, a group that provides advocacy training for women throughout the world, and is an adjunct professor at the Fellows Institute of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. We are privileged to have her as our moderator tonight, and she will introduce the panelists. Links to their websites are in the chat. Welcome, Ms. Margolis.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. We have 5 extraordinary people, and we have a lot to unpack. So let me try and get through it fairly quickly. Let me say it's a pleasure to be with you. I've been dealing with this issue for a lot of years, and we see it now as just an incredible wave. I'm following the polls, as I'm sure you are. And whereas choice was way up there a couple months ago, right after Dobbs, and it seems to be slipping. And I don't think I'm hoping I was born on a sunny day. I'm hoping that's not true. I mean, I've been working with women all over the country, and even I teach at Penn, and I'm talking to the young women, and basically, I think there is a current. What happened in Kansas is exactly what we're talking about. There is a current to make sure that this doesn't happen. And it has to do with getting everybody out to vote, keeping the interest and the passion there. So let me introduce the panel. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand, go into the chat, especially if it's something that's quite specific to what the question was and what we're talking about. Let me introduce our panelists, State Representative Tim Briggs. Tim Briggs, as we were talking earlier, when he was an infant, worked on my campaign. Hi, Tim. Tim is currently serving his 7th term as state representative for the 149th Legislative District, is the Democratic chair of the House Judiciary Committee and previous Democratic chair of the House Health Committee. If, as was said to you just before, if you have any interest in knowing more about these people, please go on their sites. State Representative Amanda Capoletti, you're there? She is an attorney with a Master of Public Health degree representing this the 17th Senatorial District. She got her start in government serving on the East Norton Board of Supervisors. She's a former director of policy at Planned Parenthood, and she serves as co-chair of the Pennsylvania Women's Health Caucus. State Representative Mary Jo Daley, yay. She also worked on my campaign before she was, before she became 20. She served as state representative from the 148th District of Pennsylvania since 2013. Prior to serving as a state in state assembly, she was the lone Democrat for 20 years on the Narberth Borough Council. She is a co-founder of Emerge Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, and she serves as co-chair of the Pennsylvania Women's Health Caucus. Dr. Jane Porcelain is a lawyer, a physician, and she's a specialist in obstetrics and gynecology and maternity care, practicing at the Lankenau Medical Center and Paoli Hospital, where she has had the privilege of treating some of her patients from their teens through pregnancy, and is now and they are now in menopause. Wow. Dr. Beverly Vaughn is also a specialist in obstetrics and gynecology and maternity care. She has OBGYN practice at Lankenau Medical Center, where she is the associate program director of OBGYN residency and medical director of the residency ambulatory care. I think we can get started. As I said, if you have any questions about them, please go on to their sites. Amanda, first question. What is the present legal and funding status of abortion in Pennsylvania today?
Thank you all so much for having me today and participating in such an important panel. It's really a privilege to represent a district that is so active and so passionate about timely and important issues like this. In Pennsylvania, right now, abortion is still safe and legal. Which is kind of why we're having this, because that's not the guarantee in the future. This election is absolutely crucial to helping to ensure that that continues to be the case. Funding, that's a really interesting question. Much like the federal government, we have kind of our own Hyde Amendment. States can use their own Medicaid dollars to fund abortion access for people who are on Medicaid. We do not, with the exceptions, much like the Hyde Amendment, the exceptions of the life for rape, incest, and the life of the mother or the person carrying the fetus. So we do not have any state-funded abortions outside of those exceptions. And really that access is contingent on your ability to actually afford that, either through private pay, if you're lucky enough to have insurance that might cover it, or be able to get access through an abortion fund.
Please speak to the importance of the reproductive choice and in the preservation of women's autonomy and equality in the family, in family and public life. If you can add that to your answer real quickly.
Oh gosh, the importance, I think the thing, and I've heard Mary Jo say it a million times, and it's so true, you can't pull apart access to abortion care from economic issues. So if you have concerns about the economy or inflation and things that are happening there, a person's ability to determine how, if, and when to start a family or expand their family is absolutely critical to all of those issues, because childcare is astronomical right now. It is not affordable for so many of us. The cost of diapers have gone up significantly. The formula shortage and what's happening there, these are all intertwined. And maybe somebody who has 2 or 3 kids can't afford that next child, needs to be able to make that decision for themselves, or we're really just, damaging our economy and being able to move forward and get really, we don't make these decisions about what happens with men if they have something like erectile dysfunction or something of that nature. Those are all good. Anything that we need for medication and kind of those areas, it's really specific to people with uteruses right now. And that's the critical focus. And we are, 50% of this economy. We are 50% of this Commonwealth. So it's crucial that we continue to play an active and full role in every aspect of our lives here in Pennsylvania.
Tim, what exactly does the amendment mean? What does it mean for reproductive choice in Pennsylvania? And where is it in the pipeline?
Thanks, Marjorie. I just want to echo what Senator Capoletti said. And it really is an honor to represent such a progressive community like Lower Merion, and to have a committee like this put together a very timely forum. It doesn't happen in a lot of places in the Commonwealth, and it really is something that makes our community so special. And you mentioned my first effort out of politics, out of college to get into politics, was actually on your congressional staff and your campaign. So it's great to see you, Marjorie. So where we are
when we had no chance of winning, and we did. It was amazing.
That's right. We had a good team, and then 94 came, and it was a tough year. But
it was the year of
you did the right. You did 2 years of a very wonderful service. So over the last number of years, the Republicans in the House and the Senate, they have the majority, have been chipping away, trying to restrict women's rights and take away their control. Thankfully, we've had a governor who has vetoed those efforts. But what they've started to do over the last couple of years is to legislate by constitutional amendment, and they try it. The constitutional amendment process is made to be a little bit more timely than a simple bill, and it takes 2 consecutive sessions to the same language has to pass 2 consecutive sessions. We're already past 1. So the fear is in the spring, early winter, our new session starts January, and that they could be put on our voting calendar very quickly and then be placed on the primary ballot. I think there's a slide that talks about what the language is, but this amendment.
Yeah, we should see the language while you're talking about it. If we can put up the language.
What we voted on in July has to do with the abortion language, which would put take away a right of Pennsylvanians to have an abortion. But it also they picked a number of things that they knew the governor would veto, and another is requiring voter ID. Another is removing the elected office of lieutenant governor. It would allow the governor to pick his lieutenant governor.
But Tim, why don't you read this first, and then go.
So the language that has to do about abortion. So we did a lot of things, requiring audits to the elections. So this language is, this Constitution does not grant the right to taxpayer-funded abortion, and I think we'll talk about that. That doesn't exist in Pennsylvania, or any other right relating to abortion, and that's really the concerning language that we all have. Because if this were to pass, and there's ways we can try to stop it, all of their efforts to criminalize and restrict access wouldn't be protected by the Constitution. Now, there's some lawyers that are trying to say any other right relating, the word relating, could actually help us, because it could be determined that relating means that you can't ban it. You can't do anything about abortion. But right now, this passed the House 107 to 92. It passed the Senate 28 to 22. They weren't party line votes, but they're largely pushed by the Republican majorities. So what we have to do is to change the makeup of the legislature this November, so this doesn't get a second trip through the legislative process. The governor can't veto this. So if we are able to shrink our margin, get to the majority in the House, win 2 seats in the Senate, we don't have to worry about this next session.
But what are some of the possible legal challenges that can be made to the abortion bans and restrictions? I mean, as you're looking at that now.
Oh, they could restrict. I mean, they could really. We'll talk more and more about it. They could criminalize this at conception. I mean, that's what the leading Republican candidate has said for governor, is that this is at conception with no exceptions. That's what my opponent has said. She's going to protect the right to life at the point of conception. So that's where it gets dangerous for Pennsylvanians to start pursuing this. What the governor has done legally to try to stop this is he petitioned the Supreme Court in August to say, that this was an unconstitutional process to do the Constitution, an amendment process this robustly. It's designed to be one question that we vote on, and then it gets on the ballot through the legislature. They added so many different topics. The Supreme Court didn't take the King's Bench request. They sent it to the Commonwealth Court, and the governor with the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats are advancing arguments to the Commonwealth Court that this shouldn't even have happened in July. But we have to be prepared that it's going to happen, and we're going to have to get mobilized, and it's not where Pennsylvania wants. So I think a constitutional amendment will fail if it's being asked by the voters. But we got to get, like you said, you started off, we got to get people fired up, and they were fired up over the summer. We got to make sure they stay fired up this November to get everyone out to vote, win more seats. And if the public isn't heard, and the Republicans, which they don't do in Harrisburg, they don't listen to their voters, this is something we're going to have to get organized in the primary and defeat.
And we've got to get more people. We've got to get more, folks who feel that choice is important there. Dr. Porcelain, Jane, what laws banning or restricting or criminalizing abortions are in the works, and what provisions, if any, will be made for exceptions in cases of rape, incest, or life or health of the mother? Jane, I think you're muted.
Well, I think currently there's nothing but what's in the pipeline, as Representative Briggs said. But we know in other states that this is really becoming a problem. And we have patients from other states crossing over to Pennsylvania, I understand, and to New York. And I understand in New York, they're doing things like shield laws to protect providers who provide abortion for out-of-state people, so that they can't be extradited to the state and face criminal charges. So, I mean, it's up to what the legislators deem they want to put in this bill. And as you said, they can do anything. We're worried about losing the right to IUDs. If we say life begins at conception, that's going to really strike out a lot of long-acting reversible contraception, which we know is very effective in preventing pregnancy. So we're very concerned. We really feel that this is going to really tie our hands with our ability to provide proper reproductive services to our patients.
I take it you're saying that the ambiguity and the vagueness is a real problem for you.
Oh, yes. But I think they're going to try to clarify it more specifically.
Dr. Vaughn, how will limits or bans on abortions affect OBGYN training?
First, I want to thank you for inviting me. This is a really illustrious and dynamic panel and group of people. So hopefully everybody will get fired up from your information. And I wanted to just tag on to what Dr. Porcelain said about the shield laws. Now, there's now a concern that doctors who practice in states that allow abortion and are doing telemedicine to provide medication abortions, at this point, they are providing it for women who are in states where there are limits to abortion. It is possible that those providers could be prosecuted. So, the tendrils are very long. So in answer to your question, we are required by our governing educational bodies to provide abortion education and training in every residency program. If the resident is uncomfortable doing that, that's fine, they can opt out, but we're required to provide training on counseling, training on methodology of first trimester abortions, whether it's surgical or whether it's medication abortions, training on abortions in the second trimester, and indications for for abortions. So given this new paradigm that we're all facing, and given the number of states that are very restrictive or have banned abortion completely, what our governing educational body has said, yes, you still need to provide this training, but you may have to send your residents out of state if your state prohibits abortion. And that's going to be really difficult if, currently there are about 20 states that ban abortion or have some sort of restrictions. Where are people going to go, and how likely is it going to be that those states have places that their trainees can actually go to for enough time to be expert in providing abortion care? So it's quite frightening that they're going to limit the educational experience, which means it limits the skill of doctors coming out, which means that there are going to be fewer physicians to take adequate care of patients.
I want to know what you think the effects of the bans will be on something like domestic violence.
Yeah.
I know that's hard to read, but you do read, especially now, post-COVID, where there are all these articles about the kinds of structures and how all of those things are falling apart in families. And this, I want to know if you think this will just add to it.
Oh, it's going to be astronomical. And the first thing I want to say is that the number one cause of death in pregnant women is homicide. And it's homicide from an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women have been victims of intimate partner violence. And one of the things we know is that, first of all, women are very hesitant to come forward to saying that they were victims. So they're kind of like the forgotten group. But if a woman is already subject to intimate partner violence, and it can be psychological, sexual, or physical, before they're pregnant, once they get pregnant, it accelerates, and it accelerates in every trimester. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So they are really risking their lives. And a lot of these women are marginalized. It's hard for them to get contraceptive care. It's hard for them to get abortion care. Some of their partners have thrown out their birth control pills and coerced them into having sexual relations. So it's just a very violent situation to be in, and it can cause increased violence to these women. There was an article in the New England Journal talking about the Supreme Court saying in New York that it's really okay to carry a gun, and that's frightening. If you're in a situation where you're going to be subject to violence and your partner has access to a gun, you have a higher likelihood of being killed. So this is a very important issue, and these are women that really don't have much of a voice. So, we really need to speak for them.
Is this, I mean, I assume you do, but is this something that is brought up in the training?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good. Mary Jo, please explain what a crisis pregnancy center is and how it's regulated.
Gee, one of my favorite topics. So crisis pregnancy centers they do not provide health care. They provide a type of ultrasound, but my understanding, it's not a diagnostic ultrasound, and we're not really sure that they have any kind of we're not sure what the training is for the people who are doing these ultrasounds. So they are set up, I mean, they kind of got invented in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, but they're set up as places to attract.
Give us some, when was that? When, can you give us an approximate?
I think it's about maybe 20 years ago.
Okay.
So they they're there to help person. You find out you're pregnant, or you think you're pregnant, you can go in and get a pregnancy test. It's a test that you can pick up at any drugstore, but it's a pregnancy test. And then if it's positive, then they offer clothing and advice and some counseling. They are not allowed to recommend any kind of abortion. They can't give a reference for an abortion. And even if a woman goes in there and is interested in having an abortion, they will not be able to get any help from the Crisis Pregnancy Center. In Pennsylvania, we have an organization called Real Alternatives that gets about $7 million a year. And this has been going on for decades, that helps to fund the crisis pregnancy centers.
But what will they hear? I mean, when you walk in, what is, if they can't be told about ending the pregnancy, what is the information that is given to them? And I suspect the word legally can be used, but what are they told?
They're told that the Crisis Pregnancy Center will help them with some of the, like funding. They're told that they can
Funding to have the child.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll give them diapers, they'll give them food, they'll give them, certain things that people need. They help with clothing and a lot of the practical kinds of things. And they offer support, but they will not provide any kind of information at all about abortion. And women don't always know that when they go into them, because a lot of times apparently they're situated close to an abortion provider. Although compared to abortion providers, I think we have about 17 abortion providers in Pennsylvania at this point, where there are many, many more crisis pregnancy centers. I don't remember the number, but it could be, 3 or 4 times as many. And they're located all around the state. We have them in Philadelphia. We have them in Norristown. We have them. And a lot of times, what we hear is they're located closer to low-income areas. So adoption is something that they will help with. But we think they're dangerous because they're really not informing women. They're not providing health care. And they recently, we've learned that they're doing this reverse abortion. So if a woman has had an abortion, they have this, they're giving them progesterone and saying that can help to reverse the abortion. This is not, the doctors can probably talk about that, but ACOG has told us as legislators that this is not something that they approve of, that it hasn't been tested, and it's not really reliable. We think that the Catholic Church supports a number of them, but quite honestly, they're very difficult to get solid information about, because the Real Alternatives group that gets the funding from the state basically has sued the state for, not sued the state, but they've refused to provide information that the state has applied for under the right to know laws, and they're not giving them that information, which is highly irregular for an organization that's getting money from the state to refuse to provide information.
And a considerable amount. It is not one of those underfunded.
No, it's not. And they spend a lot on advertising. They pay their executives 6 figures in high numbers. It's so if you think of a nonprofit executive directors are not generally very highly paid, and the folks who run Real Alternatives definitely are. So we've been talking about them and trying to get information, more information about them. There is a constituent, someone who lives in one of the districts that's new to me. It's not a new district. It's in Lower Merion. It's just new to me with the redistricting. And he has invited us. He was very upset with something I had put in the newsletter. And we'd had a conversation on primary election day. And he has now offered to arrange a tour for me to visit one of these. So we have been in conversations about that. because they generally are not open to folks like me.
I think it's safe to say that our country, and I could say Pennsylvania specifically, is failing to provide adequate social, medical, and financial support for children and families. And how will they be further affected by bans on or the restrictions on abortions?
Well, when people ask me questions like that, I think of pregnancy is a 9-month period of time, but it's also a lifetime commitment. It's not something that just comes and goes. It's a lifetime. And this is where, Amanda mentioned it, the economic status of women. It's, women make less money than men do. Black women make less money than white women do. And it's, it's one of those things that it's just going, this is an economic war on women, quite honestly, because it takes away their right to, make plans about how their life is going to go. It can interrupt a college education. It can interrupt their work. And it's just, I really think it is a war on women. So I don't have any
Let me
better answers. But the other thing I wanted to just mention about the crisis pregnancy centers is that one of the things that we've learned is they collect information, and we don't know that they're not sharing that information. So I've actually got legislation that would require transparency from them, but that won't see the light of day until we get a bigger majority in the House. So there's a lot of things to be worried about with crisis pregnancy centers.
Let me throw this out to all of you. One of our messages, one of the questions that has come in from our audience is, it seems relevant to point out that there is a Republican majority in the state legislature due to gerrymandering. There are more Democrats than ours in Pennsylvania. This November 8th election is the first election under somewhat more fair withdrawn districts. Electing Democrats to the state house and flipping that chamber to D majority is essential. And if most of you can relate to that question, answer that question, I would, or that comment, I would appreciate it. Do you want to start, Tim?
Sure. So that is the legislature we've been living with for the last couple decades. It's just increasingly becoming more partisan, more extreme on the Republican side, especially. And this last map is fair. It's not a Democratic gerrymander. It's reflective of some of our urban populations being more fairly represented. So our urban centers in Norristown, Allentown, Harrisburg, they're going to have the possibility to have more of a voice. The city of Reading will have a possibility to add a legislator. And then the competitiveness in some of the suburban seats are, when you get rid of a gerrymander district, it becomes just fairer. So we have a real opportunity to win a couple seats in the suburbs. The real question will be, will we be able to get to the majority? I think we will. It may be this November. It may be in 2024. But I think we have to do everything we can to use the new maps. The Republicans in the House voted against the maps, and it was a truly fair process. They didn't like the ungerrymandering of their, that's how they stayed in the majority for so long. But I can't urge enough. That was a lot of hard work, a lot of community activism over the number of years to try to get fairer legislative maps. For the state house and state senate, it's a different process in Congress. So hopefully we will do everything we can to get more House members and more senators to start addressing issues that we all care about in a positive way.
Mary Jo, would you tackle that one also, please?
Sure. I'm in my 10th year doing this, and the last couple of years have been much more difficult in the beginning because the Republicans who are getting elected are more and more to the right and extremist. And it's
the same across the country. Yes.
Yeah, we're mirroring what's happening in the rest of the country. And what it means is that, it's making it really difficult because there's no compromise, and they're structuring the rules so that they can cut off debate on issues. And they do not bring forward legislation that Democrats sponsor. And it's constant. It's constant. And so I agree with Tim. I mean, I know, I live and will represent an area I'm looking to represent an area that's incredibly Democratic. And so I'm doing my best to, quite honestly, to raise money to help some of the people who are struggling to win. And Democrats have to hang together and just really do everything we can. A lot of us are talking about knocking on doors in one of the districts in Montgomery County to give a boost to the Democratic candidate there. We've got some really great candidates, and unfortunately, we're all locked into certain areas. But I do believe that the maps are better maps than they were in the past. Tim has a lot more experience on it to that regard, but I think it's crucial that we do it. And I've heard the same thing, that we may not get it in 2022, but we should get it by 2024. So it's going to take constant work and constant attention.
But we really have to stay on it. And one of the things that I hear, and I'm sure, are you raising your hand, Tim?
Yeah, I have a question. All right, not a question. I want to say.
No, but I just want to say that most people, especially in Pennsylvania, say we just can't light a fire under down ballot races, and they are so important. Continue, Tim. Go on.
No, I could raise it. I just don't know how to lower. There you go. Thank you. So the real shame of what Mary Jo was saying in the Republican caucus is that there's no leadership. They've let these real fringe wackos kind of take over their caucus, and I just wanted to mention there was a senator and a House member who actually kind of did the right thing after 2020 and didn't sign on to the fake elector strategy, and both were chairs of their appropriation committees, long-serving members, and they're like, 2020 happened, we got to move forward. If there was mistakes, we should correct it in legislation, but we're not going to relive 2020. Well, they lost their primaries, so their caucus is even going more to the right.
That's happening all over the country. Yes,
it is, and even we're in the minority. I get it. Our bills aren't going to get run, but we should at least be part of the process. We should have information. We should be able to have our voice heard and trying to make impacts. But this crew is just really awful.
Scary.
And I want Mary
Amanda?
Jo, if we can help more candidates running, we had a fundraiser last week to help. A couple of our Montgomery County races. I'm the vice chair of the House Democratic Campaign Committee. I know Amanda's taken a leadership role on the Senate Campaign Committee. Mary Jo's done a great job, helping candidates. That's the benefit of representing a community like Lower Merion, is that, hopefully, we're in a good re-election position, and it's up to us to try to make an impact on a much broader level. And that's what I think we've all done really successfully.
Amanda, step in here, please.
So I think the point I want to highlight is that it has been 20 to 30 years of Republican control in this legislature, Republican policy largely being put forward. So when you hear them complain about population decrease, you hear them complain about how our schools are, falling apart, and that's why we need school choice, because the public schools are failed, whatever it is. It's their policies that got us here. And we do have a much fairer map and greater opportunities this cycle and upcoming cycles throughout the next 10 years with the fairer maps that we have. But as Tim said, Tim and Mary Jo both talked about, we have to go out there and help, not just in our backyard, which is very important, but all across Pennsylvania. And I can say with absolute certainty, we do, you know, the three of us represent an area that goes out there and puts their money where their mouth is, or, you know, they put their walking shoes on. I have seen members from Lower Merion at many different places across Pennsylvania out there to door knock and get people involved and move along. Just going to bring it back to abortion and what's really happening here. With these slightly fairer maps, I do think they could be better, and that there's definitely more districts that should be either more competitive or more blue even. And that's not even Democratic gerrymandering. It would just better reflect the Commonwealth. Even with that, we need to do as much as we can, because of these constitutional amendments, because they're not going to stop chasing that policy ideal that they want pushed forward, regardless of what the citizens of this Commonwealth think. You guys know that their choice to run this constitutional amendment, the way they're running it, and when we expect to see it on the primary ballot, has absolutely nothing to do with giving a voice to the citizens of this Commonwealth. Because if it did have something to do with that, then we'd probably see it on the 2024 general ballot, right? That's when the most people vote. This is literally just about getting their one policy through, what they think should happen. This war on women, as Mary Jo said, that's really all this is about for them. It is power play, power move, temper tantrum, childish behavior, and Pennsylvania deserves better. We deserve a better government. Like, it's really kind of embarrassing that this is how the leadership is playing out in the Republican side, that it looks like a giant temper tantrum is being thrown.
Jane and Beverly, would you like to add to this? Are there any things that you can think of as, you know, as medical experts that you would like to say? You can say no. Jane,
I know personally, I'm just talking to all of my patients and stressing with them how important it is for them to go out and vote, and to have their family members vote, and to explain to them what's at stake. I had a young girl in my office, and she was crying about what may happen for her right to have an IUD. And I said, take those tears and use them to propel you to go out there and vote, and tell all your friends to vote. Because you don't throw up your hands and say, woe is me, the sky is falling. You have to try to do something about it.
And what is their reaction? She said, yep, I'll listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, she said, oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. But
I'm sorry.
Continue. Is it Jane? Go
I'm
on.
going to have Beverly.
Beverly?
I think that people, young people, older, doesn't matter. I don't think that they understand the repercussions. I don't think people dig down to get the details, which is unfortunate, but I think that's true about our culture, you know, no matter where we're from. And, you know, it's easy to get upset, but upset doesn't get you anywhere, or maybe it will propel you, but you need to make it propel you to actually take action. And, you know, I think people feel small and maybe their vote doesn't count. And, you know, I think we have to dissuade them from that.
We've mentioned, and I would like all of you to tackle this one, that, you know, what is the differential effect of laws restricting abortions on poor communities, especially poor communities of color?
Well, it's huge. And when you look at it, it affects communities that are Black, that are Latinx, in a much greater way. And if you're going back to talking about how the right to choose is integrated with economic success or stability, these groups also make, and somebody had said this before, make far less money So they're already economically strapped. And then if you take away their ability to choose and they add to their family and they're more strapped, they, can't afford childcare, can't get health care. It's a disproportionate burden. So, I think that, again, everybody needs to speak for everybody, and not just look at your own little window, which I don't think anybody here is doing, but it's already bad.
And it's getting worse.
It's just gonna get worse.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go to one of the questions that was put in the
Actually,
chat.
if I could just jump in real fast on that
Sure.
topic.
Absolutely.
Just because of my background with Planned Parenthood, I learned early on in my advocacy work that there is a direct tie between the anti-choice movement, and that's what I'm going to call it, and racism. And I think that needs to be spoken about more. The people who actually started this movement did so as a reaction to Brown versus the Board of Education, because they knew in digging in on the access to this type of healthcare would actually further put people or keep people in poverty and specifically Black people in poverty without access to these
in
things.
their place.
Yes, exactly. It keeps that there. So that you cannot talk about these issues and specifically talk about the impact that it has on a Black and Brown community without recognizing that really this was born out of racism. This, like, many of the religious groups, evangelicals included, or I guess Christian groups mostly, really had no serious issue. I think that Catholics were the only ones, if I'm remembering correctly, who had an issue with abortion prior to Roe v. Wade and prior to this anti-choice movement. They were able to rile up the evangelicals and other types of Christian groups that were ingratiated into kind of like the KKK and the white Christian nationalist movements there. So these are all very much intertwined, and you can't really talk about it, especially the history and the past and the impact, without acknowledging that that's where this all came from. This entire anti-choice movement is really rooted in racism, because I have the resources necessary to get myself where I need to go. God forbid abortion access becomes null and void here in Pennsylvania, but the people I represent in Norristown don't necessarily have those same resources or the same privilege that I have to get themselves the same care.
But you've provided a good bridge. One of the questions that's being asked on the chat is, what religious issues are involved in the effort to declare that life begins at conception?
Right. It is the white Christian nationalist movement. And many of you already know this, as there are many of you in this community, in the District 17 in this community, that have reached out to me with concerns, because Judaism takes a very different approach to when life begins, and it's an infringement on that First Amendment right. And, talking about it in that context is something that is also really important, but it is, very much tied to that white Christian national movement, the evangelical movement that is kind of spearheading this extremist views and behaviors that we're seeing play out all over the country.
Mary Jo, take it away.
So there's a couple of things. I look at the Catholic Church. I recently read the ethical and religious directives that they use for their healthcare facilities, and it's a pretty shocking document to read. And they are requiring all healthcare institutions, and have been requiring all healthcare institutions, to follow these. And I'm trying to get more information about them. But, Catholic Church believes that life begins at conception. And so they're against contraception of all sorts. And, what I'm trying to find out is, to be able to talk to somebody who works in one of these hospitals to just have a conversation about how they actually treat women who may come in or who are hemorrhaging or having some issue, and then just making them wait and wait. And potentially these women, I mean, we read them stories in the newspaper that people have passed away. And I'm just trying to find out like how they can actually do that. But the other concern about these ethical and religious directives, which I think that we all probably need to take a look at, is that the Catholic hospitals are taking on more secular hospitals and they're buying up hospitals. And that's pretty scary if you think that they have to, follow these directives. And the other thing that I wanted, just to go back to the last one, and there's two other things related to race and to race, is maternal mortality rates are so much higher with Black women, but also, and I don't know if I can link this to anything, but we have maternity deserts in Pennsylvania in different areas, as close to us as Delaware County. We have them in Philadelphia. And so those are just a few other things to think about in this cheery conversation.
Well,
And
I would like,
I'm
go
sorry,
on.
just to add to what Mary Jo said, there are deserts, and when you realize how many hospitals are closing, it makes it even harder to get care.
I obviously come from a clear persuasion one side, but I would like all of you to comment really quickly on the governor's race and the senatorial race and what we are seeing at the top of the ticket. Because for me, and as I said, I mean, you know where we're coming from, there's a bit of a gift out there because the folks are pretty extreme. But I would like all of you to comment on what you are seeing at the top of this ticket.
I just have a comment to say, I think that the legislature, in trying to pass this amendment, is anticipating that there'll be a Democratic governor. And they want to do this constitutional amendment so they can circumvent this veto and get what they want in that respect. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind and educate people about that election that's coming up and that amendment that may be there, and like Kansas did, and motivate people to come out and vote.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Dr. Porcelain. That is so accurate. I'll speak from the perspective of somebody who has been attempting to start a family throughout this whole process, and then as somebody who is currently pregnant, and what kind of that added stress of hearing all of this does to you. When this first started, became a question of, as I'm starting my family, I have a history of miscarriage. What does that mean for my own treatment? What does that mean for treatment for people with ectopic pregnancies? I have friends that have suffered those. What does that mean for the miscarriages, for the fetal diagnoses? I have friends from all of those different categories that have had to make a variety of decisions, because people don't always recognize that a miscarriage is medically a spontaneous abortion. And that is what it is termed as, and that the treatment, if your body does not expel of all of the tissue on its own, is medication abortion, or it might be a surgical abortion as well, just to make sure everything is gone, depending on how far along you were in all of that happening. And, that became a huge worry, thinking about what my own healthcare would look like and what would be available to me as I'm going through this process. And now at 19 weeks pregnant today, I have been out there at rallies hearing people as far along as I am telling their stories of losing their pregnancy, a fetal diagnosis, and all of those different things, and the gut-wrenching issues that go along with that, and that added stress of what's already a stressful period for me, and hoping that we're successful this time, is not something I want for anyone to go through, but it is. There is this added stress of, well, I'm due in March, and what does that mean to me if Josh Shapiro isn't our governor? What does that mean to me if John Fetterman doesn't win? Because at the beginning of this, you stated that what happened with the Dobbs decision gave states the right to make these decisions about reproductive health care. But that wasn't the end goal. The end goal was not to let states make their decisions. And Lindsey Graham made that perfectly clear already. He's got legislation out there to market at 15 weeks. So God forbid something had happened to me now and Lindsey Graham legislation was in place. You know, where would I be? What would that mean for my future, my health, and my fertility options in the future? That, like, it's a much more complicated issue. And that is, all of this is also not to downplay then the fact that, you know, any reason for access to abortion care is a valid one. Nobody should be in there with your doctors. So it's a very complicated and stressful time as somebody who is starting a family and has been through these things. And I can only imagine there are many other women that are going through.
I'm
Can I
sure that
interject? This is the problem when you have legislators that make these blanket statements that don't understand the complexities of the situation. And I don't know if you all recall that in Ireland, a physician who was 17 weeks pregnant had an inevitable abortion. She, ruptured her membranes. And because there was a heartbeat, they couldn't intervene until she got to the point where she was septic. And then they intervened and she died.
wow. I'm going to have
never
to.
have survived.
This is an incredibly dramatic, and thank you, Amanda, for sharing what you have, and we all send our love and our wishes for you.
Thank you.
We have been told, and I'm extremely obedient, that I should be throwing it over to Sarah to sum up our meeting. Thank you all for participating. I think it was very informative, and let's stay in touch. Sarah, are you there?
I am here. I am going to share call to action slide. And I want to first and foremost thank all our very, very powerful panelists and our amazing moderator. Amanda, you just gave me the biggest smile. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy days to have this important conversation that impacts every single Pennsylvanian. My name, as Marjorie said, is Sarah Atkins, and I am DCLMN's Candidate Support Subcommittee Chair. So before we all go, I would like to share a few action items. As we learned tonight, electing Attorney General Josh Shapiro as our next governor is crucial to ensuring there is freedom for families to make healthcare choices in the Commonwealth, and re-electing Representative Daley and Representative Briggs to the State House is equally as important. We must make sure to elect Lieutenant Governor Fetterman as our next senator and re-elect Representative Scanlon and Representative Dean to the House. The GOP is literally depending on their candidates to win and then pass a federal total abortion ban with no exceptions, as Amanda said. So we must stop them at the ballot box this November 8th. The way we win is at the doors. We have knocked here in Lower Merion around 5,000 doors already, and we have 1,000 more. I literally handed out 90 turfs of over 3,000 doors to committee people just in this last 24 hours, and we have even more to go. So please join us for Get Out the Vote community canvassing every single Saturday and Sunday from 9:30 to 3:30. And the Saturday and Sunday before the election, we'll have another shift from 3:30 to 5:30. Stephanie is going to be putting the link in the chat right now. And we really need you to join us canvassing the community, as well as talking to your family and friends to make sure they have a plan to vote. Now, once we have knocked all the doors leading up to this election day, we have two very important ways for you to help us at the polls. The first is to volunteer for DCLMN, and you can do this, and Stephanie is going to drop the link in the chat right now by clicking on the volunteer link. As well, she is going to drop the link so that you can find out who your committee person is and how to contact them. So you can reach out to them about how to volunteer at your poll, and also make phone calls to remind people to get their mail-in ballots in on election day. And anybody who hasn't come to vote in the evening, also we're going to be making calls to get them out before the polls close. Additionally, the second way you can help out on election day is volunteer with PA Dem's voter protection team. And Stephanie is going to be putting that also in the chat. It's super important that we protect our polls, protect our voters, make sure that people aren't turned away. So that is a very important job. From Phyllis Rubin, I want to remind everybody who Phyllis is our voter registration chair. The deadline for voter registration is this coming Monday, October 24th. You can find the form to register as a new voter or update your registration at vote.pa.gov. And together as a team, we can work to make sure our rights are not stolen from us and save our democracy on November 8th. So let's do it. Let's hit those doors and let's make sure we get out the vote. And thank you, everyone.
And also a special thanks to Merion and to Adrian and to Jim. Really, they were amazing.
Great. Well, thanks for joining, everyone, and sign up, use the link, sign up to volunteer, and come back for our next event. We'll be communicating in the future. So have a good evening, everyone.